Hi, I'm Thomas Bowles, Prince William County Agricultural Extension Agent. Welcome to our video.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Trish Westenbrook. I am the Environmental and Natural Resource Educator here at Virginia Cooperative Extension in Prince William County. I welcome you tonight to talk about gardening basics, specifically soils and turf. Today, we will be going through a limited journey, really focusing in on supporting our turf by taking stock of what kind of turf we have, what the soil is to support that growth of turf in our lush lawns, and then looking at that soil and making any adjustments to promote the growth of a healthy lawn. And that would include any ground preparations, lime, fertilizer, and soil amendments. And so that will be the scope of today's talk because I am a Best Lawns coordinator for the county. So I could talk turf all night, but I'm sure that a lot of us have other places to be later on this evening. And so before we get into the neat weeds of everything, we do want to understand what is our intent with our lawns. Everyone has a different viewpoint of what they want to accomplish with their lawns. And I would say that it is important that that everyone kind of look and whatever we are looking at aspirationally, that we tend to understand also not only what the perfect lawn for us would be, but also take into consideration how we use our lawn. So while we may have some ideals and dreams for our lawns, sometimes our usage of our lawns or who else uses our lawns may overtake our idealistic goals, whether that be an area of activity for our pets, or sports or children playing in the backyard, or if you use your yard for entertaining and what that aesthetic you expect it to be. And so before we get into too much, it's important to know what kind of turf we have. And oftentimes you'll hear folks ask you what type of variety of grass you have before making any recommendations to help you look at your lawn and kind of meet that ideal. And understanding whether or not your grass is a cool season grass versus a warm season grass is important because as cool season grasses, the name kind of implies, such as our fescues and Kentucky bluegrass, those types of grasses thrive in our cooler months, so spring, fall, and sometimes we're warm enough during the winter months that the grass actually is still able to keep green and there's still some root growth during the winter time. And so these are very thrifty types of grasses. And then unless there is an intervention that is made for the grass, they tend to go slightly dormant when there is like droughty conditions or when our summer heat comes on. So you start to see our grasses cool season grasses tend to look a little bit more dull. They start to brown out and go dormant in the height of the summer. And so some of the grasses, each variety within these types of grasses have shade tolerance. So think about your trees, your bushes, your fence lines. And so different varieties are there that can tolerate shade tolerance. I put down the height of the ideal height for the grass. And this is important just primarily because the nature of the organism itself and how they grows. Cool season grasses tend to tiller, and that is under that certain point. If you have the growing points, they tend to become more bushier. They are a little bit taller. They can regenerate and keep healthy. Primarily at a height between 3.5 and 4 inches. And so it's one of those kinds of things that we want to kind of keep in the back of our mind when we're thinking about what's in our lawns. On the flip side of that, we have warm season grasses, such as Bermuda grass and zoysia, Nimblewill is technically a weed for most people, but it is a warm season grass technically. And so as the name implies, in the height of the summer, this is when these grasses really, really shine. We don't tend to see very many lawns like this in our area, but I have seen, particularly here in Manassas Park, and maybe some of our newer builds, when they know, when the contractor is aware that the units are going to go up for sale, and those units are going to be complete, let's say like in the height of the summer, like in June, July, and August, some of those warm season grasses are really great, particularly Zoysia or Bermuda, to go down, to put down really quickly in full sun. And they will also help with the erosion control and be able to get signed off, so that sale of that unit can happen fairly quickly. So these are the grasses that right now we tend to see are brown, and are waiting for our soil temperatures to warm up, and then really come out of that dormancy. They also basically grow in a different habit, and that habit is via stolon. And so that tends to be, so they're able to tolerate a lower height. Usually between 1 and 1.5 for Zoysia, and 1.5 and 2.5 for Bermuda. And that's important to know, because that's one of the reasons why we see them in golf courses, and things along that line. And so when we're looking at our lawn, we want to look at the top to see what's there. I encourage folks to walk their lawns, and walk their whole lawn, and kind of get a feel for how their lawn feels. And then also to look for signs of a healthy soil, because the lawn will tell you if it needs something. Um, and so some of the signs of a healthy soil are the aggregate stability. And we tend to talk about aggregates. Really, it's about those small clumps of soil, and how it feels in your hand. The rounder those clumps are, the more friable and healthier the soil tends to be. It allows for water to get through, air to get through, roots to be able to grow through that soil. And so it tends to be, and it feels softer underfoot as well as in your hand, and as you're going through that. When you have aggregates, or the clumps of soil particles are sharper, that means that they tend to be flatter. And because they are flatter, it tends to be a little bit more compact. And so we tend to see other issues with the soil because of that. Other signs of a healthy soil include that there's low residue. So for those of you who mulch your lawn as opposed to removing the grass clippings, it means that you're not seeing the grass clippings stay on your lawn. You're not making like mini hay piles all through the way. And then also we look at the permeability of the soil, how quickly water infiltrates. And then also how that friability, in the absence of crusting, so you don't see those pans on the top of your soil, those bare spots, that allows, for plants to grow, seed to soil contact, and things like that. Um, when I say that it's penetrable, it means that there's really minimal compaction. So therefore, the roots can grow long and deep. The roots can also get at more nutrients that way. And then generally speaking, when you're looking at soil, that those dark, richer browns tend to kind of visually also tell us that there is a healthier soil there. And then we also look at your soil biology. We obviously want microbes and different types of bacteria and things along those lines working their way through. But the little critters are important too. Ants are extraordinarily important. They have multiple condos underneath our lawns. They're a sign of a very healthy soil. worms, obviously, other like beetles and other insects that can be in there that are basically turning over the soil, decomposing matter, kind of turning everything over and being a natural tillage without causing too much soil disturbance. Those that are starred in this, such as we tend to see indicators of that in the soil test. And it's important to understand how our soil is, like what soil we have. And so we often recommend soil testing. And one way of understanding in the soil test, we can also take a look at soil's organic carbon. So that kind of tells us a little bit about the soil biology. The mineralization potential kind of helps us understand its water infiltration and the biology in general and the chemistry of it. The aggregate stability, and then also its water holding capacity. And so all of those are indicators in a soil test. And we can use that there as well. Speaking of soil testing, there are many of you that are on this call that are part of our Best Lawns program, and I know that you know how to take a soil test. But for those of you who are joining us that may have never taken a soil test, you don't necessarily need one of these fancy foot augers, but we do want to have a soil core that is taken about 4 to 6 inches of the soil. You tend to remove the top with the grass and roots. You remove that from your soil. So we say 4 to 6 inches because the healthier soil, you'll find that you are removing maybe a top 1 to 2 inches to get to the soil portion of your core. But you don't need anything fancy like this core. You could use a bulb planter that generally goes down to 6 inches, a hand spade or a hand trowel. You can also use the spade where you can use a slice portion, but it's ideal to make sure that when you're getting that 4 to 6 inches that you go straight down perpendicular to where you're taking that soil test. We always want a representative sample of your management area. So if you're going to manage the front and back of your lawn, unless it's something crazy where you have a visible difference between the front and the back of your lawn, meaning that there might be different soil types. One might be on a slope, one might not be. Generally, we recommend about one test, but you can have more if you have different management areas. And that representative sample, I like to do a zigzag pattern. If it's a really large area, some of our residents have larger acreage where we're actually in acreage for their lawns. I like the Frisbee test. You throw the Frisbee, where it lands is where you take your soil test. You do tend to avoid what I would call like trouble spots. Definitely avoid any area where any pet either urinates or defecates, just because that will throw off the nutrient values. And not only that, but particularly the urine has salts in there that will throw off the test as well. So keep that in mind and make sure that it is representative of your lawn. Mix it up in a bucket and then package it up into a box, if you will, and send it off to a lab. There are private labs that do it. Your contractor may do it for you, but also Virginia Cooperative Extension has soil test kits in most of the libraries and at our office available for pickup. You'll also find them at the farmers market at this time of year, and you can go ahead and fill those out. You can send them on your own. I think Virginia Cooperative Extension, the soil test, if you send it in on your own, you take your own soil test, it's $10. We do have a program, which I'll speak about a little bit later, that will facilitate that for you and go through that. And so after you're doing your soil test and taking stock of what's there, you get this wonderful thing back. And I don't know about all y'all's, but it's been a minute since I've been in college and looking at something in a science class. So if ever you do your soil test yourself and you receive results and you're not entirely clear about what you're looking at, please feel free to contact the office. We're happy to walk anything through. But I do want to show that the soil test results, they are very specific to your soil. If you have a pH of 6 and your neighbor has a pH of 6, but your buffer index is different, that means that you could have a different level of recommendation to adjust the pH on your soil. And so it's important to understand that the soil test not only gives you nutrient values of what's there, but also the pH value and the chemistry values as well. And then buffering index, the lower it is, the harder it is for those soil aggregates to give up and adjust their pH, so to speak. It makes it tends to be a lot more difficult to raise the pH, so the liming recommendation tends to be higher. And so a clay soil would be tends to have a lower buffer index than soil that would be sandier and more loose, if you will. And so you would need less lime if you have a sandy soil compared to a clayey soil. And when we're looking at our soils, we talked about those aggregates, and we were looking at compaction. And oftentimes, if we're looking at our turf, we want to make sure that there's friability in the soil, so that the nutrients, water, air is important to get to those roots to promote root growth for our turf. And so oftentimes if we look, we see there might be trouble spots, and we would recommend you to aerate it. If you have trouble spots, spot aeration is not all that bad, but big, huge aeration projects, generally speaking, you want to do that prior to fertilizing and or overseeding. Most core aeration, unless it's severe, we recommend that to be a fall type of activity in preparation for either an overseeding or for your fertilization. That's primarily due to the timing of your fertilizer, depending on your grass. The one thing I would say that can also help when you aerate is to apply other amendments such as compost or anything like that. When you use, we find that there are aerators that are spiky and don't pull up a very big plug. They tend not to be really effective because it's like drawing a knife, and so it's not really providing enough air and everything along that line. And so we recommend folks try to use a regular aerator. The one that's up in the upper right-hand corner over here in this section here is the one that you stand on. These ones are ideal for when you have to do spot aeration. And then they have these pull behinds also available. If you need to get a contractor for it, that's perfectly fine too. But they also have them available for rent at some of the local hardware stores as well. Once you go through the aeration process, as you can see, the roots become a little bit deeper, much more density. And then what also happens is that the turf becomes much more resistant to drought because water penetration and everything else starts to flow through that. And the stronger the root system is, the deeper the roots are, the more heat tolerant and drought tolerant the turf becomes, irrespective of what type of grass it is. We talked about the soil test a little bit, and we talk about lime and preparing the soil. Often lime is one of your biggest bangs for your buck, so to speak, if you are going to do a soil amendment. I would preface that lime is more important than putting down fertilizer for your turf. That may be controversial for folks, but that tends to be true. And that's primarily because there are nutrients in our soil that need to be unlocked, so to speak, by raising the pH because of the nature and the chemistry of the soil. And so most plants, the big macronutrients, so to speak, a plant's fat, carbohydrate, and protein is nitrate, potassium, and phosphate or phosphorus. And those become more available when the pH is anywhere between 6.2 and 6.8. Most turf grass likes, we tend to go towards 6.5 for turf grasses. It is important for us to know what your codes are and crop codes when you're filling out your soil test because warm season grasses tend to tolerate actually a more acidic range. And then cool season grasses tend to be up more closer towards the 6.5 and maybe a little bit higher for growth. And so that's where they feel most comfortable, like a warm blanket. But most of the soils naturally in Prince William County tend to be a little bit more acidic. And so if you're walking your lawn and you start seeing things like wild strawberries, wild violet, or moss in some of those shadier and damper areas, that is an indication that you have an acidic soil. And because those plants tend to thrive right there. And and so what we want to do is we want to adjust the pH. And on your soil test, it tells you how the lime is, and that obviously raises the pH, what the liming recommendation is. And generally speaking, it's 50 pounds per 1,000 square feet every 30 days until you reach your the maximum portion of it. It's important to realize that lime is done only to the soil test, which means that you do not need to do it every year. And not only that, but even after the 2 to 3 years after your last soil test, you may test your soil again and find out that through other soil amendments that you may not need lime either in the same amount or you may not need lime at all until the next soil test after that. For soils that tend to be a little bit more sandier and have really good drainage, we recommend soil tests every 2 to 3 years. For those that are more clayey, that hang on to nutrients and have a hard time shifting, once an amendment is done, we recommend soil testing around every 3 years. There are soil tests that come into our office that are higher than 7. I've seen 7.5. I've even seen an 8 because folks have not soil tested and just went ahead and applied lime. It could also be that maybe they are rotating a vegetable patch and rotating in to use grasses. I know some folks that plant down clover or grass in their and as part of their rotation, and so the acidifying types of fertilizer tends to help lower the pH because they usually contain aluminum sulfate or elemental sulfur. Other things that we can add to the soil is organic matter. This helps it to balance and slow release a lot of nutrients. It also helps with water retention, and it also increases that friability of that soil. You start seeing that darker color and along those lines. And we end up feeding the bugs and creating a great soil biology there as well. And ways that we can increase organic matter, grass cycling. Most folks are starting to mulch their lawns, and by that I mean that they're not removing the clippings. Grass cycling works best if you only remove the top third of the grass. So if you're at 3.5, you're cutting your grass at 4.5 inches. And so kind of think about that as you're doing that. It also adds nutrients, which we'll talk about later. And then of course there's compost. Compost I tend to recommend towards the fall if you can. This is usually done at a 1/4 inch over an area. just so that the grass can kind of grow through it and keep it light. One thing also is that if you have a mulching mower, I also recommend that you mulch your leaf litter. This also provides nutrients and organic matter. Leaf litter can be high, depending on where you are, can be high in phosphorus. So if your soil test is in a medium range and you mulch in your leaf litter, then you can use a turf type fertilizer and help protect our waterways regarding that. And then of course fertilizer. Um, fertilizer is primarily addressing the macronutrients. You do just see things that are sufficient or deficient depending on your crop code for micronutrients, and those tend to be addressed a little bit separately. But we primarily look at those macronutrients of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And nitrogen rates, grass, depending on your grass, cool season grasses don't really benefit from a spring application just simply because you want to encourage the root growth. And so it can accelerate growth, top growth, more over root growth if you apply in the spring. So generally speaking, for cool season grasses, recommend a fall application. And just keep in mind that grass cycling, if you are grass cycling, you can save yourself from applying maybe the third application or an application of nitrogen in the fall. And then if you diversify your lawn and don't view clover as a weed, and I do understand weeds are in the eye of the beholder, but I highly recommend clover if you can diversify your lawn, particularly if you have cool season grasses, because clover does give a visual curb appearance of greenery during the summer months. It is a little bit more undulating, like cloud-like from a distance, but it does have a benefit of providing a pound of nitrogen as well. And then the fertilizer, the potassium and phosphorus rates are usually based on your soil test. And so what we tend to see is that you get recommended a certain type of fertilizer. And in general speaking, turf type fertilizer is much more readily available, and that usually does not contain phosphorus. And we would recommend that if you're grass cycling and or leaf mulching. And definitely it's recommended if your soil is high. Phosphorus can leak into our waterways and cause other water quality issues. So hence our hesitation to recommend other types of fertilizer like 10-10-10, which you would use in your maybe your vegetable garden, just simply because the turf wouldn't be able to take up that amount. And there might be plenty of phosphorus in your soil, depending, of course, on your soil test. Oop. And yeah. And then timing of fertilizer. Warm season grasses do benefit. So if you do happen to have a warm season grass, late spring into midsummer, just before it starts to kick off, it benefits from a boost. And that's also primarily due to the way that that turf grass grows, right? So just remember it's stolon based, so it benefits a little bit better. Cool season, I highly recommend the fall. If you can skip the spring, it will help that root growth. And then any application that you are making, whether it's fertilizer or any other type of soil amendment, such as lime, I highly recommend that you calibrate or at least attempt to let me drop a video link into the chat and from Dr. Goatley. It's what you would call good enough for government work, as they say. It's a very easy way without having to go crazy on calibration to go ahead and figure out how much you need in your spreader and using the fertilizer label. And it's a pretty entertaining YouTube video. And then also when you're applying any amendment, please make sure that you understand the labels, and particularly the fertilizer label. And apologies, but you want to know how much your bag will cover. Number one, and number two, you want to know how much nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are there. The turf type fertilizers, you'll see instead of 22, 3, 14, you'll see a 22, 0, 14. So it's always NPK in the fertilizer portion of it. And you want to kind of match that to the soil test and cover that per 100 weight. Usually the rates it's fairly quick math, but the 22, 0, and 14, those are per 100 square feet. And then it basically it goes from there. And so you just tend to do a little bit of math calculation and you're off and running. We do have a program that can help folks with folks to figure out their lawns. We have an amazing core of master gardeners who've gone through a series of training that can provide consultations specifically for your lawn. And so that includes taking the soil test, you receive a report that is specific to your lawn and to your concerns. And if you're present during the site assessment, the master gardener is able to address your concerns as well, and do some troubleshooting for your landscape. This also takes, and we provide you the top recommendations for the best bang of your buck to keep your soil healthy so that you can have nice, thick, and wonderful turf. I'd like to stop there and ask if there are any questions. Apologies for going over. And please feel free to come off mute. Okay, let me go in here. Let's see. Okay, so we do have a comment regarding compost, and I just want folks to realize compost, you want to make sure that compost is what we call finished compost, and Grant made the comment of heat treated, and this is to avoid weeds and other things that are in the compost, because it's a living kind of thing. So you want finished compost that has finished its biodynamics. And the other part is that be careful of the product that you have. If you have a cow manure and compost, cow manure is a fertilizer, and so please make sure that you read the label to see what additional nutrients you might be adding in that as well. Let's see, Grant. Okay, that's just a comment. How can you change the type of lawn you have? Is a question that we received. If you are comfortable in coming off of mute, would you like to expand on that just a little bit? Just simply because I'm not entirely sure.
What the issue is that I have a combination of what I saw that you had there.
Mm-hmm.
I have some that it's the ones that have the pointy with like the long string, with a bunch of points on them. And then I have in the front, I'm not concerned about the front as much as I am the backyard. Right, that's the one that I have in the backyard.
Mm-hmm.
But the front yard is totally different. than what's in the backyard. And the backyard tends to run, that grass runs all over the place, and it's really messy. So that's why I was asking you, is there a way for me to maybe, I guess, dig that up and put something else down that is
So
more cohesive with what I have in the front?
there are several different ways that you can do that. And depending on the pressure, what I would say is this is the other reason why I gave you the heights
Hmm.
of the grass. So if the first thing I would do is check your mowing height. And if you have the grass, if you prefer the grass, which is, it sounds like you're preferring oops, where'd it go? Cool season grass. Correct?
Yeah, well, see, I have that in the front.
And you
I have
prefer
that
that,
in the
right?
front and the other in the back.
Right. And if you look, the grass in the front likes uh, the 3.5, 4 inches high.
Yeah, well, see,
Um,
I don't have a problem cutting it. It's just the fact that the backyard, it's like wild hair in the backyard. This is the way
mhm.
that looks. It's just it spreads out all over the place. And even though I cut it, it's like it comes out like it's really blunt after it's been cut. It doesn't look as cohesive as the one in the front does. I'm wanting to have what's in the front in the back.
Right. And so one of the things that I would recommend is double checking the mowing deck height on your mower.
Hmm.
Because the higher that you mow and the higher that you mow to 3.5, that starts to make things more uncomfortable for the one that likes um, the that tends to be it makes it uncomfortable for the one that likes to have light. So what ends up happening is the grass that you really like is growing at a higher portion and it starts to shade out the grass that requires or prefers to have light. And when it's starting to shade that out, that starts to dissipate. So that's one thing that you can do without expending a lot of money. The
Okay.
other thing that you can do is you can spot treat, of course, uh, for like weed management. The stolons you could try to hand pull, but generally speaking, depending on the invasiveness of it, that might not necessarily be uh, feasible to do that. So depending on the usage in the back, you could spot treat it with a weed and feed. And I would say a weeder as opposed to a weed and feed, depending on the timing. And then basically move your maintenance of your grass geared towards how cool season grasses thrive. Because if you are moving your fertilization towards the fall, the root growth of the cool season grasses will overtake. And it does take time, but then you'll start to see a change in what's happening there. It is hard because this type of grass, they both like the same pH. So that's not going to do anything for you. So usually we recommend a mechanical or cultural management. And then also the other thing too is uh, is just to kind of keep an eye. And then if you need to, we can always go out for a consultation and go further with that if the cultural management is not working. It really depends on how big, and then you would overseed and just encourage the growth of and replenish the seed bed for your cool season grasses.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Um, and the cold season height, it might be just small, but the cold season height is 3.5 to 4.0 right there. And my thoughts on weed and feed products readily available at different outlets. Weed and feed has its place. I have no real strong opinions on them other than my recommendation is always to go to your soil test and to the plant that you are trying to and to what the needs of are the plant and the soil. And what your goals are for your lawn. Everyone has a different goal. Everyone has a different usage. And so there's places for that. And that's really my only opinion on that. Are there any other questions or concerns regarding anything that we covered today?
Trish, isn't it best to try to get a pre-emergent that doesn't include fertilizer?
Um, if you are using pre-emergent, it depends on the weeds that you're trying to control. So I generally recommend that, like, if the question to me was originally, what are my thoughts on weed and feed? So like on the product. So the product has a place for itself. But if you are looking at managing your lawn for specific weeds and you are looking at a product to either do spot control or broadcast, I tend to recommend spot control over broadcast if at all possible. And you have a cool season grass, then a weed or a herbicide product without nutrients, without the weed or with the feed part for cool season grasses on certain pre-emergent timing of it would be recommended. However, if you are doing for fall annuals, you would be able to sorry, for fall annuals, for winter pre-emergence winter annuals, and you're using cool season grasses, you could use a weed and feed technically if you needed to add nitrogen to increase the vigor of the grass. So it really depends on what you are trying to do at the time and what you're trying to control and what type of grass that you have that makes sense for it. Does that make sense? Am I, uh,
Yeah,
so,
but I was specific. I guess I was thinking for cool season grass, when you put a pre-emergent down in early spring prior to like crabgrass, etc., from
yeah, so
propagating that,
yeah, in early
I
spring,
would try to
yes.
get a
And I
pre-emergent
would,
without feed.
yeah, in early spring, you would do it without the feed. You would just do a pre-emergent herbicide. If that's what you're controlling, yes.
Right, but
But in the fall,
the problem is most all of the products that Lowe's or Home Depot sell include the feed.
so, uh, I can't speak to their stock and every year it changes. And, that's part of buyer beware. And all we can do is, you know, talk about what's best for your lawn, and what's best for, that's theirs. Because, uh, like I said, they do have a place, in the toolbox. And it's up to us to take stock of what we have, look at what the plant needs, and use the right tool to address any situation or concern that we have. Okay. Any other questions or anything along that line? I really do appreciate all of you coming out tonight, and we would appreciate if you would complete an evaluation of this session. There is a link in the chat. Thank you, Christina, as well as the QR code that is up on your screen. Again, we were only covering the soil side of things, and looking at turf. And so please, if you are interested in learning more about turf grass, and its full cycle, I highly encourage you to check out our publications in the previous link, as well as considering reaching out to our master gardeners. Whether you are a Best Lawns and Landscapes person, that's perfectly fine. But also we have a master gardener help desk that is also willing to answer your turf questions as well. And always feel free to contact me at the office, and we'll be happy to assist. With that, thank you very much, and we'll call it a day.
If you enjoyed this video, please let us know with your questions, comments, and suggestions for other classes. For more information on lawns and gardens, contact the Extension Horticulture Help Desk at mastergardener@pwcgov.org. Thank you, and we hope to see you next time.